You okay to start recording, Alex? I'll do as an intro. Brilliant, lovely stuff. Okay, cool. All right, I'll start now. Hey guys, thank you for attending today. Really appreciate it. Fortunately, my laptop's broken at the moment, so that's why you're getting just a boring black and white picture. I mean, I do apologise. For those of you who haven't been here before, as the talk goes on, you think of your questions, please do type them into the chat section. I'll be making a note of those. And at the end of the talk, we'll have a Q&A session with Stuart about the questions that have come to mind as we've gone through this talk. But yeah, I'm not going to take up any more time because time's precious. So I'm going to hand it straight to you, Stuart. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Anthony. So firstly, thank you everybody for joining. So just very quickly, I just wanted to, for those that don't know me, so I'm Stuart Day. I'm the head of quality at Dunelm Soft Furnishings. I've worked in software delivery and quality testing side of things for around about 23 years. I say around about, it was actually 23 years anniversary last week. So that doesn't make me feel old at all. That's within the airline, e-commerce, retail, banking industries. So I've got a good mix of kind of experience. Been agile for over 10 years. That doesn't mean I can touch my toes because that's kind of going away as well every day. Advocate of quality first and quality engineering. I'm a quality coach and mentor. I speak at meetups, facilitate and organize meetups as well. I'm one of the co-hosts of Ministry of Testing Essentials in the Midlands. I'm also certified Agile coach and Agile team facilitator. And by the t-shirt, you can see I'm a big Back to the Future fan. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to crack on. So the title of this talk is The Future of Testing and How Can We Be Prepared? And powering this talk will be the flux capacitor. So you'll already see that there's a theme going on. Okay, so you're all Back to the Future fans out there. We'll kind of catch on to some of these things as we go through. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, highly recommend you do. So firstly, what I want to do is I want to talk about how things have changed over time. So as I mentioned, I've been in the industry for 23 years. And like a lot of people, actually, I kind of just fell into testing and quality. So what I want to do is I want to take us back. So we're going to look at the tech almanac. Okay, so I want to take us back to 1st of September 1997 at 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so this was the first role. I'd been out of college for a year. I've done a role around being a systems administrator for a company on a youth training scheme, which didn't quite work out very well. And I was out of work for a little bit, and I found this role being advertised in the window of a recruitment agency in our local town, and it was for a UAT analyst. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Read the description, thought, yeah, I could do that. Applied and got the role. Didn't really know what a UAT analyst was, to be fair. So turned up on my first day, jumped on public transport with my bus timetable in my bag. Got to the office and I was a bit like, okay, so what is this role? Didn't really have a clue around what testing was, didn't really have a clue about what UAT was. But this was my intro into a lot of, where I am today. And I was at this organization for 13 years. I learned my trade there, but also, I progressed through a number of different roles. And over that time, technology changed massively. So the company that I worked for was a company called OAG, and they were, and they're still around now. They publish airline schedules and do a lot of other things as well now, but they're big in the airline scheduling industry. And the day I started there, some of the tech that we were using was, well, some people may not even recognize some of the tech that I've got on this slide right now. The technology we had an IBM AS400 mainframe, big old thing. We had green screen VDUs. I remember it was only the supervisors at the time that had a PC. So if you wanted to do anything on a PC, you had to go and speak to the supervisor to actually be able to do that. And the primary focus then was very much around printing these guides here, the flight guide, the worldwide flight guide. And we often had to look at printouts, and we were utilizing things like these line printers. And I remember printing out these documents and having to go through line by line, checking to make sure that the content of the thing was right, and marking where it was wrong and all this kind of thing. But one of the things that for me, joining this organization was I trained up very, very for the first few weeks, couple of months, really around the systems and the technology they were using, but I still didn't really have a real good idea of what a UAT analyst was, or what testing really was. And gradually, obviously, that kind of became a bit more of a self-learn thing. We often pull people in from within the organization, which really kind of obviously didn't get knowledge in from the outside, but we learned our trade internally and kind of worked on what was best for us. So you're looking at technologies here that these would be great in a museum nowadays. There's a fax machine here. If anybody hasn't seen a fax machine, well, I believe Messi uses one. There's a fax machine. There's a desktop phone. Wow. And as 13 years was a long time to be in this company, so technology obviously moved on, but it still was quite limited, to be fair, in terms of how much technology as a company we were kind of targeting and what our customers were using. We had some PDA devices where we were uploading timetable information to one of the very first, potentially one of the very first smartphones. It was the SPV, where we were looking at how we could do SMS alerting for flight status information and that kind of stuff. But even then, the technology didn't seem to be, especially for our customers, didn't seem to move on that quickly. So, it was 13 years where things within this organization stood quite still in terms of tech. And obviously, I continued to learn my trade there, and our ways of working were very, very, what we'd class nowadays as legacy. I mean, to be fair, when I was there, I didn't even really know that we were doing waterfall. I didn't know what waterfall really was when I started. It was only over time we kind of obviously realized how we were working. Everything was manual. Everything was testing. It was manual testing. Even to the point of if we wanted to test something performance related, we'd get a stopwatch out and we'd see how long it takes to load a file, or run a test, or that kind of thing. And the big thing, obviously, we were always being squeezed for time in terms of how these big projects that we would invest time and money in, and always end up having to squeeze time at the end to make sure that we did enough testing to make sure we hit a deadline. I think one of the projects we worked on was quoted to be 2 years. It ended up being 5 years. That was a re-platform to come off the mainframe. Those kind of things were really, really evident back then. And in terms of our ways of working, they didn't really evolve hugely. We had big specification documents. Everything was kind of handoffs. One of the things that did play to our advantage was we had our IT team was quite small. So even though we did have these handoffs and we worked in this way, we were able to speak to our developers if we chose to. And obviously, because the team was small, it was easier to kind of communicate in that way. But it was very much, we were still classed as the gatekeepers of quality, even throughout that whole 13-year period that I was there. And we kind of looked at and tried to work a bit more collaboratively in some ways, but it didn't quite evolve as quickly as potentially things evolve nowadays. But the one thing, obviously, you can see there as well, even though we were working in this way, we did still use Post-its. So we were quite advanced with Post-its, right? Because everybody uses Post-its, still do. So what I want to do is just jump forward very, very quickly now to August, I think it was August 23rd. I mean, James, who's on the call, who was my manager at this time, may be able to correct me on this, but I think it was around about that time, August 23rd, 2010, when I joined EasyJet. And the reason I joined EasyJet was very much because as I mentioned previously, the technology and the ways of working weren't evolving very quickly within the organization that I was working with. And outside, I was very aware that things were moving forward. And I obviously I knew people in the industry of testing and software development. And, the talk then was all around agile and, this is the great new thing, and how quickly technology was moving along. And I needed to make a decision in terms of, okay, do I stay where I am? Because I was in a test manager's role. I was literally 5 minutes walk away from my house as well, which was always very nice. Or do I take the challenge and almost take a kind of a step back in terms of become a test analyst to relearn my trade, but also step out of my comfort zone. So I was still in the airline industry, but moving into an e-commerce world. Now, one of the things, if you're a Back to the Future fan, around about this time, we would have been expecting things like hoverboards and flying cars, but no, unfortunately, that wasn't the case at all. I had to drive to work. I did have a car by then, which was lovely, but I still had to drive to work. And yeah, the best thing I think I had an old skateboard, but yeah, never rode it. So coming into EasyJet was a real eye-opener for me. And the technologies that we were sort of facing into and I was at EasyJet roughly around almost 4 years. And it was really eye-opening to me in terms of, the technology over that time and how technology changed, and how ways of working kind of evolved and how different they were from what I'd been used to for 13 years. So coming into EasyJet, and can I just say, if you've never worked for an airline, work for an airline. I know they've not had a great time of it over the last X amount of months with everything that's been going on, but it is a really great place, great opportunity to work, because it really kind of opens up your eyes to a number of things. We had to face into a number of different technologies, and we were obviously the primary thing is all around flight reservations and booking online and making sure our passengers get into the air on time. And we over time we had to face into things like the mobile phones. We obviously facing into the different browsers, which I wasn't used to necessarily from the time I spent with OAG. That was very much different types of applications and technologies we were using there, but they weren't really customer facing in this way. So it was a really kind of eye opener for me in terms of how we would approach things, and also the potential risk of issues going through into our production environments. So we kind of looked at things like obviously the boarding passes. We implemented allocated seating, the EasyJet allocated seating, and Steve and James, who are on this call right now, will know all about the fun we had with that. We all faced into mobile apps. The EasyJet app launched during that time as well, and also cloud. So we as part of the allocated seating project, we invested and moved that piece of functionality into Azure Cloud as well. So all these things started to take shape, and we whereas I was saying we were doing things very manually at OEG when I was there, things were moving on at EasyJet. So we were looking at more automated means of doing things. So automated testing. We had more robust performance testing that we would do via third parties that were formed part of our day-to-day or our sprint-to-sprint, and everybody loves Jira, right? So we were using Jira as well. That was tongue-in-cheek, by the way, if anybody didn't get that. So we were kind of it was really great to kind of be working in different ways with different technologies. In terms of our ways of working, we were working in utilizing Scrum. So we were working in sprints. We had our board set up. We were using user stories for determining what it was that we wanted to deliver. We started looking at things like BDD, and this was where I first came in contact with BDD. I think, all the learnings I took from what we did at EasyJet from the start of looking at BDD, obviously we kind of probably got it wrong to start with, because we were very much looking at utilizing BDD as an automation mechanism rather than the collaborative mechanism. But they're all lessons learned, and they're great lessons. It was a much more collaborative environment. We still did have the kind of the devs deved and the testers tested kind of approach. But it was a much more collaborative environment because we were working in Scrum. So we talked more, we sat at the same desk, that kind of thing. We did invest, as I mentioned, in automation. But again, it was very UI driven. A lot of what we did then was very focused at the UI, not so much at the unit test level. But it was really great to kind of be working somewhere that was trying to do these things and learn from them as well. We were looking at things like how we did more exploratory testing and regression and performance, and as I mentioned before. But we were still kind of pretty much the gatekeepers of the quality. So we would sign something off after the sprint to make sure all the teams are happy. We would sign stuff off at the end of a regression to make sure we could release. And actually our release processes were still very manual as well. So our releases would be from 10 p.m. I think roughly 10 p.m. to like 4 a.m. On a particular evening. We'd have to take all our systems down, including our reservation system, and deploy everything because we had big monoliths, and then bring it all back up. And I remember, some evenings we'd kind of overrun, and we'd be looking out the hangar window into the car park and seeing customers turning up at the airport ready for the first wave of check-in, and we still hadn't got the reservation system back up. And that's quite pressure, quite a lot of pressure to be under during a release. So things were, whilst obviously we were moving in direction. Still, sometimes it felt like we were kind of moving a little bit slower. Sprints were 3 weeks. We then did kind of 1 to 2 weeks regression on some stuff because there was so much to do. That's why we tried to invest in automation, which did speed things up. But then we had a lot of maintenance around those things as well. And I was there for about 4 years. Oh, also, guess what? We used Post-its. So I was there for around about 4 years, and then moved on somewhere else. But what I want to do is I want to bring you more to the now. So if you look at how technology and ways of working have kind of evolved from back in 1997 to what I'm showing you here now, which was between 2010 and 2014, you can see that there was a lot of change, more technologies coming in, more things to think about from a quality perspective. And as testers, trying to learn new things, learn new trades, really understand our engineering processes and stuff more and more. And the other thing to think about is, you'll see here on this slide is that, the Kanban type board that we've got here is very much testing was still a phase that we did. And it was often even through the sprints squeezed towards the end. So let's just fast forward now to, guess what? Today, 7th of September, 2020 at 12:20. Well, I'm not too far off. So what does it look like? So a lot of things have changed in this time. So from 2014 to now, which is only 6 years, that's a good job I'm good at maths because that would have looked embarrassing. There's a hell of a lot of things that have changed. I mean, the last few months, things have changed massively anyway. We're all working more remotely, so therefore we're more reliant on remote technology. It's kind of impacted our ways of working, our ways of thinking. And as QAs and as testers, obviously, again, we've had to adapt. We've had to kind of, for people, the teams that are used to sitting next to each other and talking, you've now got to think about how can we continue those collaborative ways of working through different means. And things like serverless technology is such a big thing now, and the cloud is such a big thing now that all these things kind of just are quite mind-blowing in terms of how far we've come in times in the last 6 years or so. So if we look at what we're doing at Dunelm at the moment, in terms of the technologies we're using, so this is a messy slide, right? But I just wanted to kind of give you an example of all the different types of technologies we're using currently at Dunelm, and they all have their uses, right? So we are trying to phase some stuff out. As you can see, we still use SAP. So that's something that is a big piece of our architecture, our legacy architecture, but it's fundamental to it, pretty much everything that we're doing right now. So we are looking at how we kind of come away from SAP moving forward, and become more aligned to how we've built our digital platform, which is serverless technology, microservice, all up in the cloud, or all auto scaling. We're invested in Fastly as our CDN capability. We've built our applications in Node, React. We've spent a lot of time with using Jenkins and what will be GitLab very soon to build our pipelines and things like that. But obviously, we've still got the challenges of mobiles. We've still got the challenges of browsers. Interestingly, things have changed from a browser perspective, whereas I think before it was very much, does it function in a browser? Whereas now a lot of the browsers are built on the same underlying technology, and therefore functional testing within browsers is probably less important, whereas visual becomes a much more kind of go-to thing these days around, does it visually look correct in all these browsers, and how quickly can I do that? Obviously, Slack for communication. We're looking at utilizing Pact for contract testing. One of the things that is thrown up at us is that being in the world of microservices, it becomes very challenging to, whilst they're independent to a degree. It does cause many problems in the sense of how do we test them from an integration perspective, and ensure that they are talking to each other correctly, you're getting the right responses back. And that's one thing we re-platformed at Dunelm back in October last year, and it was about an 18-month project. Excuse me. And one of the things, when I rejoined Dunelm beginning of last year, we were kind of in this midst of, we need to do these big end-to-end tests of all our applications because we haven't really done anything from an integration perspective to give us confidence. And it kind of reminded me going back, several years of doing those big end-to-end tests for monolith systems that you couldn't really get away from. Whereas we built an application and built our architecture to enable us to test more frequently, faster feedback, those kind of things. We hadn't utilized it in that way. So we'd really dropped the ball around testability, and whether it was going to perform correctly, for the volumes of customers that we had coming on board, those kind of things. So all this stuff was still very much left towards the end of the delivery, even though we got the architecture there to do it much sooner. So if I just jump forward to kind of how we work at Dunelm. So one of the things with me coming back to Dunelm, whilst we were doing some good stuff in the quality space, there was still this air of devs deved, testers tested. Even though the engineers were more involved and they were more aware of the need for quality, let's put it that way. It was still very difficult to kind of get them aligned in terms of getting them to be part of the testing and think about automation, but not automate everything, automate what you need to automate, utilizing exploratory testing more, those kind of things. And over the last 18 months or so, we've really focused on trying to build a culture of quality, if you like. So thinking about quality first, really kind of looking at how our engineers and our QAs pair up more, test early, all that kind of good shift left stuff that you hear about, which actually is really difficult to achieve because it's not just about technology that's going to get you there. It's about the mindset and the ways of working. Whereas before we were very much, in the pretty much all the organizations that I'd worked in before, it was very much QA was pretty much the gatekeeper. They'd always have the final say as to whether something was going to be released. What we've been trying to get to here is not about, having gatekeepers, but having, team ownership around quality, and focus on prevention of issues rather than, finding them and fixing them later down the food chain. Now, I remember conversations, that great feeling when you're a tester or a QA, and you find a bug and you tell you tell the developer, and it's like, guess what I found? Big smile on your face just to look at the reaction of the developer. We've all been there. We've all gone, how many bugs have you found? And it was always a nice warm feeling. But when I look back at it, it's kind of like, that's probably not the best kind of experience for anybody that's now starting out. They shouldn't be thinking in those ways. And we really need to think about having empathy for our engineering need to think and have empathy for what we do in the quality space, and we need to work more more in unison in terms of bringing these things together and really focusing on building the quality in as we go, rather than assessing a quality through testing or checks, automated checks and things like that. And it's been really interesting to see some engineers and some of the QAs have really kind of just done this naturally. Others have been taking a little bit more time. Some still wrap their arms around it and say, no, testing's my role. Don't take that away from me. But it's not really about taking anything away from anyone. It's really trying about building those cross-functional T-shaped teams or people within cross-functional teams. So I've seen things like questions going around on LinkedIn and Twitter about, what would you do if you're the only tester in a cross-functional team? Well, to start with, you should never be the only tester if your team is truly cross-functional. So, the idea of a cross-functional team is everybody can assist in all these different areas. You may not be the specialist, but you are able to pick up some testing, or you can pair with your engineer and understand coding and understand engineering practices. So we're practicing, obviously, really focusing on quality first. Utilizing BDD for collaboration up front. We've invested heavily in DevOps as a culture, and obviously through the DevOps the DevOps mechanism, if you like. You can basically test the whole at every single point. We've invested a lot of time and money into our continuous integration, delivery, and deployment, and it's really been that way as well, because we've kind of gone. We've taken that slow, and one of the other things I kind of said to the guys when I returned was, I think we're trying to go too fast. We were trying to chase continuous deployment when, to be honest, we were nowhere near ready. We didn't have the quality, to push that out. We didn't have the automation in place to really do those verification checks. We didn't even have the upfront collaboration that really kind of would embed the quality up front, through the discussions we were having and those kind of things. So we've kind of grown into that, and obviously that's created different opportunities, different challenges in terms of how we need to think about things from a quality and testing perspective, who's doing it, and obviously kind of letting go a little bit to think, I'm not here to raise bugs, find bugs. I'm here to work collaboratively to prevent these things and build quality in. And actually we're at the point where our QAs are very much, well, we want our engineers to test, whereas before it would be like, no, testing is my thing. Not everybody can do testing. Well, in today's society, pretty much anybody can do testing. They may not be a specialist, but they can do it, and actually we should be open to that. So we've looked at how we build performance into our pipelines, whereas I mentioned when I was at EasyJet, we used to do performance testing every sprint, but it was kind of separate, and because of the application, it was very troublesome sometimes, and we got the results late, and it was challenging. And anybody that's done any work in performance will know you find an issue with performance, with load or scalability, they are always the hardest things to analyze and unpick. So you don't really want to be hitting them towards the end of a delivery. You want to be kind of facing into those things as early as possible. So, you know, we're trying to kind of look at how we do things. You know, I'm not going to use the term best practice because I don't believe in the term best practice. I think, you know, the practices we undertake evolve constantly. So what may be classed as best practice today, next week will be out the window. So, you know, it's more around, you know, that continuous improvement. We've got a goal we're going after. How do we achieve that goal? And, you know, the quality, the culture of quality is very much at the center of that. So just kind of, that's kind of, you know, I wanted to give you an idea of, from my own personal experiences, right, how things have changed, and through my eyes, you know, where things have evolved and, you know, where they've not evolved. I mean, look, guess what? We still use Post-its, you know, so it says something there. But, you know, I think everybody, yeah, everybody's kind of will view this differently. Everybody will have different experiences. You know, I've learned in my short period as doing some contracting, I learned a lot through banking and how teams are working and so on as well. So I guess what may the future hold? So if one thing Back to the Future 2 kind of showed us was it's pretty hard to predict the future. So we got some stuff right. So you can see here that, you know, Marty's son was able to watch videos through his glasses. Well, Google Glass came out, wasn't overly successful, but yeah, we've got facial recognition, we've got 3D films. Again, 3D films, you know, depending on whether you're a film buff, you'll like them or hate them. But we haven't got flying cars. And, you know, I think, you know, everybody, that was the one thing that everybody was really excited about. The self-lacing shoes as well. I mean, my daughter would love them right now because she's trying to learn how to tie her shoes right now. So if she sees this film, she'll be really disappointed. And the hoverboard. I mean, the hoverboard is a great example of designing something without really knowing how your customer is going to use it. Who knew that you couldn't go over a lake in the hoverboard, right? There you go. So in terms of technology, you know, I think, and this is just kind of my take on this, right? And you can take what you want. You can, you know, obviously question me around some of these things. But my view is obviously that there is going to be more cloud and serverless tech, right? I think that's a given. I think we're going to see more and more infrastructure as code as well. So we're going to move away from the manual configuration stuff, and we start using Terraform and Kubernetes and those kind of things more and more. I think AI and AR will continue to grow. It's difficult to say how quickly, especially AI. AI is always an interesting one. And a lot of the discussions, you know, I've been on some discussions around, you know, will AI replace testing? Well, probably not. And, you know, it's got to be very, very advanced to really think for itself. And in that way, the human brain and utilizing your own experiences is, you know, going to be far greater than AI at its present state. Maybe in many, many years' time, there might be something that comes close, but, you know, I don't think it's ever going to replace, you know, the need for people to physically test something. There's going to be more and more automation. Okay. And I think that will drive and be at the center of the success of a lot of organizations. But on the other hand, manual testing is not going to die. Remember, automation is only as good as what you're telling it to do anyway. So, you know, you've got to think about those things. You've got to assess the risk. You've got to understand what you need to automate. And that's where AI may come in terms of helping to, you know, what should I automate based on this, that, and the other. But for me, the real big benefit of automation, and I've had this conversation with so many of our engineers, is actually it frees you up to do more and more exploratory testing. And exploratory testing is a manual process that, you know, is so valuable because if you've got time to do it. It really helps you understand your product and explore your product and you know, think about how, you know, if you've taken time to understand your customers, then it's a great way of really understanding the product and as to whether it will meet their needs. more, and I think there's going to be a lot more self-serve technology. So I mean, obviously, the serverless side of things and is very much helps organizations basically just go, well, we'll, scales itself, and we'll use what we need, and we won't when we won't, and that's very much self-serve. But again, we got things with, like, we're seeing around, Amazon, releasing their new store concepts of, I can't remember what they're called now, but going in there, serving yourself, coming out, not having to really speak to anybody. I mean, sometimes that's great, but I think, it's nice to, especially being in lockdown for so long, it's very nice to actually speak to some people face to face on occasions. So I think, from my perspective, technology is going to shift. Obviously, we saw how quickly, or we've seen how quickly technology has kind of shaped over, the timelines of events. Now, I went from a 13-year stint in one organization where technology didn't really evolve massively, but then that's probably more so around our customer base, and what our customer needs, and what was happening in that side of the industry. I went to EasyJet, and things were moving. They moved more rapidly. We were looking at more technologies, the mobile boarding pass, the app, all those kind of things. And actually, that was quite a short space of time in which we delivered a lot of those things. And then fast forward to now, we're using a whole host of technologies to basically help us along our ways. Technology makes engineering quicker, easier, more self-sufficient, those kind of things as well. What about ways of working? So ways of working, as I mentioned earlier, I think in the future, everyone will test. Not necessarily everyone will be a specialist, okay? And I think within our industry, we really need to kind of take a step back and sometimes remove ourselves from, the common thing around, well, not everybody can test, right? You need to be a specialist to do this. You need to there is some truth in that, but I think in today's society, in terms of how teams work, in terms of the agile practices, the collaboration, that kind of way of working, I think we need to open ourselves up to say, yes, we should be encouraging everyone to test, because everyone is responsible for the quality of the product we're putting out. You can't say people need to own the quality if they're not. If we're then going to say, well, you can't do this bit because that's our job. And I think our engineers are very, very good at that now, and actually our QAs are starting to pick up engineering type tasks as well, because they're pairing a lot more, understanding the code a lot more, and so on and so on. So we're really trying to, at Dunelm at the moment, we're trying to blur the lines between the engineering and the quality space. It's never good. There's always going to be the two things, but it's really trying to bring them more together. We've got other teams who are less mature and are just starting on that journey, where we still got a lot of manual testing happening, and it's very much done dev test kind of approach. So we've got a lot to go through and still learn. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shapes up. Speed and agility will become even more important. So that means shifting left more, but also shifting right and really understanding our customers. Now, if we want to deliver quickly, we need to understand what we need to deliver. And a great way to understand what we need to deliver is to understand our customer, right? So if we can understand our customer, then that helps when we're talking down this side of the process. And when I say shift more left, it's not just about CI/CD. It's about everything we do before we push code, or we put a PR in and merge that code in, right? So the conversations we have, how we clarify our tickets, what testing do we do before we do, we put those PRs in, what demos are we doing, and what code reviews are we doing with our engineers and our QAs, how are they working? Quality will be front and center. So, and I say this because customers they're going to be less patient because they've got so many options, right? I mean, you look at banking, how Monzo come along and change the shape of banking, and you've just got options out there now that you can just switch to different providers, or sales teams or whatever, really, really quickly. And So we've really got to be thinking more around quality, but as you know, then we've got point two, which is speed and agility. So how do we deliver quality at speed? You know, so these are the things we need to think about more. Cross-functional teams with T-shaped members will just naturally need to increase. I think you know, we need to kind of broaden, get a much bigger breadth of knowledge around these things, so understand technology more, or have more empathy for engineering. You know, but don't lose sight of, you know, where your specialism is. And if your specialism is very much in the testing space, you know, go deeper into that area as well. So think about more around, you know, the breadth of the testing spectrum. So you think about performance, security, you know, accessibility, all these things that maybe you've never done before will start playing more and more into the space. And then I think as we kind of build more and more self-managing teams, the role of test leads and managers will naturally just need to evolve, or the risk is that it will fade away. And I think, you know, the reason I say that is because what we're trying to do at Dunelm, for example, is very much lead from within the team. So, you know, put the autonomy to the team. Yes, we have strategy. Yes, we have, you know, a continuous improvements roadmap for our chapter and things like that. But how they go about delivering that, how they go about assessing whether they're successful or not, is for the team to determine. So it's those kind of things that you need to start really thinking about around ways of working. But I think there's one thing that we can all guarantee, and that's that. Guess what? We'll still have post-its, because post-its never die. It's an amazing thing. So how can we prepare? So firstly, we need to have a growth mindset. Okay, so we need to be thinking, you know, look at these challenges and opportunities, you know, really kind of step into this, really self-learn, you know, don't be scared of failure, acknowledge and embrace where you feel as though you need to learn, and, you know, don't shy away from it. Just utilize failure as an opportunity to grow your learnings and grow your experience. And, you know, I think we also need to think about, you know, looking at, rather than necessarily saying, oh, you know, developers are X, maybe start having a bit of empathy for them and really thinking about, you know, understanding their trade and vice versa, enabling them to understand our trade. And not just engineers, you know, our POs, our Scrum Masters, our BAs, you know, our customers. But we really need to grow, you know, have that growth mindset to really evolve and continue to develop. We can't be stuck in our old ways. We can't be talking about how many defects have we raised, how many, you know, assessing quality on defects. I'll give you an example, right? I don't encourage defects to be raised in a sprint. I try and encourage the guys, don't raise a defect, have a chat about it and get it fixed. Because actually, if you've done your upfront collaboration, everything should be detailed in your story. And if you're telling me that something's not working based on the story, that's your conversation right there. Rather than going away and raising a defect and, you know, taking the time to do that and going through that whole cycle. Some teams have adopted it, others haven't. We've done away with bug boards and things like that. But, you know, it's those kind of just innovative kind of ways of thinking that may just make the difference in your teams. It won't work for everybody, trust me, but just try it. Just think differently, think outside the box. And then don't fade away. Okay, so there's a lot of people that are very much concerned around, you know, do I need to learn automation? Do I need to? Yes. Yeah, in my opinion, yes. But think of it a bit more logically, right? Become the flux capacitor of quality. Okay, so you remember Back to the Future, where flux capacitor makes time travel possible. Everything centers around it. You become that person within the industry, right? Within your team. So think about being a quality advocate. Focus on quality engineering. Okay, so understand engineering practices. Don't just worry about automation. Automation is part of that. But if you don't really understand engineering practices, it's very difficult to engage and have empathy for your engineers. Widen your breadth, you know, your breadth of testing and tech knowledge. Tech we've seen it moves at a fast pace. Anybody working in tech can't assume that their role within a 5-year period is not going to have to evolve, or how they think, because tech changes so quickly. So, don't think that you're doing a role now that in 5 years' time is going to be safe because of X. No, just always think about evolution. Collaboration. So think about how you build quality in. So as being that advocate, build quality in. Coaching. So I mentioned before around test leads and managers. This is so important. I can't recommend highly enough. Becoming a qualified coach, having a coach, and being a coach. It's so rewarding on both ends, but also so valuable, because coaching quality into an organization is really where test managers and test leads, I see them kind of becoming those kind of roles. I've mentioned the engineering thing, cloud technology, for obvious reasons. Just get your head into it, get an understanding of it. There's plenty of courses out there to do that. Keep up to date with tech and ways of working. There's no reason nobody should be able to do this these days. I mean, great meetups like this one. There's so many out there that you can just jump on in a lunchtime and learn. I mean, I wish I had that back in 1997 when I didn't have a clue about what I could hardly spell testing, let alone know what it really was. And just always focus on innovation and how you can evolve. Don't be scared to change. Don't be scared to innovate and try something different. And finally, I just want to say how personally why I think we are so privileged to work in these roles. It's very rare you'll have a role where your breadth of knowledge needs to be so great that actually it could take you in so many different directions, right? So here we've got a flux capacitor, as I mentioned. That's you guys there in your teams, but you're learning so much about coaching. You're learning about performance engineering. You're learning about engineering, DevOps, Scrum mastering, business analyst, because you liaise with them day in, day out. You're there to kind of help them as much as they are to help you. But also what you're gaining is you're gaining a raft of knowledge, a raft of experience that you can basically take anywhere. We are really privileged, and we should think about that. I've done, a lot of, I've done a lot of coaching, and I love it. It's great, but I'm still coaching in the quality space. It doesn't need to be different. You don't need to go and be, I just coach agile. You can coach so many different things. So, we are really privileged. And, I just don't want people to forget that and be concerned about some of the things I've said. There's opportunities out there for if you just want to go out and grasp them, and, even within the quality space itself. So that's me. Hopefully that's been good. I don't know, but I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Okay, we've got quite a selection of questions. I'll get through as many as possible. Just bear with me 1 minute. I scroll up through the chat. Bear with me a sec. So from Steve Davis, do you think there's a case to say customers are becoming more quality based on the delivery method of smartphones and apps? Initial delivery followed by regular updates to resolve bugs and add features. By stealth, it seems consumers are becoming attuned to buying into iPad delivery and consumerism.
So I missed the first bit of that. And can you just repeat it?
Yeah, sure. Do you think there's a case to say customers are becoming more patient with quality?
I think they're understanding technology more. I mean, if you were to speak to my father-in-law, he's the most impatient person. His Wi-Fi wasn't working the other day, and he wanted me to fix the world. But it really is kind of, it's going to be the what is your customer market? So for us at Dunelm, our primary customer is kind of middle-aged and above. Now, those people may not be as accepting of technology and the I've got to wait for an update, but that's cool. So it's really going to be driven by your customer in the market you're in. So I think that's something we're always going to need to consider. But yeah, I think definitely customers will understand technology more as we kind of progress. But I don't think we can just assume that they're going to be more patient.
Brilliant, thank you, Stuart. Next question from Chris Henderson. What are the main challenges faced when trying to adopt a culture of quality? Shift left. and what can be done to help this transition easier?
So I think the biggest challenges for me are, and it's going to sound a bit cliche, right? But it is the mindset, and one of the things that we've worked really hard on is bringing in people with that mindset. So there is a phrase that if you can't change the people, change the people. And sometimes it is as hard as that. If you haven't got the right mindset, if your organization is going on a transformation, sometimes some people aren't going to be right for that transformation. It's a horrible thing to say, but that's where the coaching side of it comes in really, really, massively. And I think what you need to be able to do is look at quality and how you measure quality and how you then talk about that within your organization. And there's a great book, so I know a lot of people have probably read it, called Lead. This book here around leading quality. It just gives so many great examples where the conversations you have are really important on a day-to-day basis. The values. What we've done as a chapter is we're creating values and principles that we want to talk about and champion on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just me in the head of role trying to have these conversations, but we're doing it in the teams. We're doing it at every level possible, and it can be a real slow process, but it's really trying to shift those mindsets of quality is everybody's responsibility, and and understanding the impact of what we have on our customers if it's not good enough. And it's also understanding what is good enough as well. And again, it comes back to understanding the customers.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Next question from James McKay. How have you got on with influencing and training developers that quality really needs embracing by this group to have any hopes of delivering a quality product?
Yeah, this is always a difficult one. I think it's the biggest challenge is, I think, when if you're lucky enough that you've got at least one engineer in your team that understands or wants to do this, that's a real win. If you've got one engineer that will kind of champion it and start encouraging others, or at least showcasing and leading by example, that's a massive win. We're going through this a little bit at the moment with some of our teams. Some of our engineers are just like all over this. I don't even need to talk to them because it's just ingrained in how they think. Whereas there's other teams where we just got to nurture them a little bit more, and kind of not force them into anything, but just kind of talk to them about the benefits of doing certain things at certain times, and a lot of this is really about just collaborating better as well. So and again having empathy for your engineers. If you can build empathy for your engineers and actually understand engineering and the challenges those guys go through, that can really help. So I mentioned earlier about I've had a lot of conversations with some of our engineers that are all over the engineering side of it and the automation. They love it, but they're asking me now, Stu, now we've got all this automation, can we stop doing exploratory testing? So I'm like, no, you can't. The idea is you can do more of it. It's amazing, right? Biggest benefit of automation, exploratory. So, and it's trying to educate them in those kind of things as well. And, one of the tech leads came up to me and said, I don't really understand what exploratory testing is. Can you kind of, and what we've done is we've created guilds. So we've got a quality engineering guild where we talk about this stuff a lot and have sessions around it. And that's open to the organization, that's open to the world. And we can try and keep that constant discussion and education going. There's always going to be challenges with this, but it's just kind of getting those champions and from within.
Okay, I'm just going to squeeze this last question in, Stu, because this prompted quite a big discussion in chat around the no bugs. So basically the group says, do you believe in no bugs, or is there a case for some bugs for what wasn't seen, considered, foreseeable, and wasn't in scope for the current sprint, i.e. is there a case for _some bugs _?
So let's face it, right? There's always going to be bugs. But what my kind of approach to this is, I don't believe a bug is a bug until it's in production. Now, up until that point, it's just work in progress. Now, how you differentiate and how you manage that is really kind of, down to the team. If it's something that wasn't thought about within the scope of a story, then for me, that isn't a bug. That's feature related, and therefore that's either comes in as a late change to your story, which is never great, or it's another story. Because that is feature development if it's a change in the actual functionality or the feature you're delivering. So again, in terms of within a sprint, obviously looking at and how you measure the success of a piece of code or a feature or a product, it's based on whether it's meeting the criteria, that's your scenarios or your acceptance. And for me, having a conversation is far more powerful than raising a ticket in Jira and then just handing it off to somebody to get them to fix. And it also gives you the opportunity to really determine, are your stories up front had enough investment, understood, and worth are ready to be delivered. It's a controversial thing, right? It's not all teams like it. Whenever I've raised it before, people are a bit like, "Whoa, hold on a minute." But it's something to try. But again, you have to be a bit mindful of it and mature around it, and give the ownership to the teams to really manage it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stuart. So we'll wrap it up there, guys. I'm conscious, we've hit 1 o'clock. Thank you so much, everyone, that's attended today. There will be a lean coffee morning follow-up this week, which I'll be posting at some point. So have a quick chat with Stuart about that. But thank you very much. Please do all stay safe, stay care, and keep an eye on the meetup page for the next meetup. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.